This program is a presentation of UCTV for educational and non-commercial use only.
A very, very, very special welcome to each and every one of you that is either tuned in today and or here with us today. I absolutely love walking into a new group and hearing the stories ahead of time about why are you here? And I've asked many people that as they walk in the door. Why did you come to this presentation about vitamin D and prevention? And almost to a person, I hear some of the most heartrending kind of stories, which is like, my daughter has multiple sclerosis and we just heard something about vitamin D. Or I have breast cancer. Or I had some kind of cancer and this looks like it might help. I'm here to tell you it helps. And we have put together a major public health action program called D-Action to help get the word out about how it helps through education and blood testing and follow-up with health surveys. So there is so much to learn, and I'm just absolutely delighted to be here to share this public health program with you. And along with my presentation, which will be a little bit about the history of the organization and what we're doing, and part of my answer to the is it true that you see on that very first slide there, we're also going to have the pleasure of having Dr. Cedric Garland, who is a professor at the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, and also with the Moores Cancer Center. For those of you who've had cancer, and even those of you who have not, but who've had very loved ones who have had cancer, I want to indicate a few things that have brought us here thus far. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2005. The cancer was bad enough, but then I had the treatment for cancer. I had a mastectomy. I had chemotherapy, which permanently damaged some of my body. I had radiation until I bled. And all of this led me to an intense desire to find a better way. Through my skills, my husband's skills, my son who's a researcher, and all of these marvelous scientists that I have now met with vitamin D, it became very clear that, oh my gosh, there's a way out there, and that way is called prevention. In 2007, in May, there was a spectacular seminar sponsored by the National Cancer Institute, a two-day seminar where they had researchers from all over the world presenting what they knew about vitamin D and cancer. I was privileged to attend that seminar, and I sat there and listened for 2 days at everything people knew, everything from experiments with mice models to petri dishes to human beings, and what we know and what we didn't know. And while there certainly was a lot that we don't know, and there still is, there was so much that was known that at the end of the day, on the second day, after hearing all of these people talk, and they were talking about what to do next, I couldn't sit still any longer. We had these beautiful microphones that were sitting on our desk, and they had little buttons on the end of them which you could push if you wanted to speak. And after my heart stopped beating for a few minutes because I knew I had to ask a question, I punched that button. And I asked a question which truly has changed my life, and I honestly hope the lives of already thousands of people. I said, how are you going to get the message out? And there was kind of a silence in the room because that wasn't the topic of the session. These were a group of very spectacular researchers. The get the message out is generally a different group of people. At any rate, right after the seminar, I probably had a third to a half of the room come around me and say, how do we help? And all of a sudden it dawned on me that we had this spectacular scientific knowledge without a sales team. Well, we then spent, my husband and I, Leo Baggerly, who is a retired physicist, now turned vitamin D researchers, spent the next 3 months traveling the country, meeting with the vitamin D researchers all over the United States and in Canada to find out what's the message, what do we need to convey to people in order to help them deal with this vitamin D deficiency and get rid of it. And the most beautiful thing of all happened. It couldn't quite happen, but as many of you have read or you see from time to time in the news media, there's this ongoing discussion about what dosage should I take? Well, first of all, it's the wrong question. You're never going to get a consensus when you're asking the wrong question. And the reason it's the wrong question is because it's like many other things. It's like asking, well, how much food should I eat? Well, it depends on your body size. It depends on your weight. It depends on your age. It depends on how much you exercise. Exactly the same is true with vitamin D. It depends on where you live in the country, what your skin color is, how much time you spend out in the sun. So there will never be an answer to what's the dosage. On the other hand, we now have a scientific panel of 30 very respected scientists from all over the country who have said, I agree on what the blood serum level ought to be. And given that as the core message, we have put together a public health program which has many parts. What I'd like to do right now is run through some slides for you to give you a background of this basis for recommendations. Again, the recommendation that they all have agreed on is the 40 to 60 nanograms per milliliter. And if you happen to be in Canada or many other parts of the world, people talk about nanomoles per liter. So that's the same as 100 to 150 nanomoles per liter. And even without measuring your serum level, if you walked into the grocery store or the drugstore and started taking 2,000 IU a day, they said that's safe. I wanted to show you a beautiful chart that I have always liked for putting things in perspective. The perspective is, how do we know what that 40 to 60 nanograms per milliliter is? Where does it come from? If you take a look at the left side of the chart, that very first red box there is in that 40 to 60 nanograms per milliliter range. And that is what is called a box for the old world primates, the monkeys. The next one, which is also in that range, a little narrower, is the lifeguard level, or at least that's what I call it. For people exposing their full bodies to the sun for a good portion of the day, they also get to that same level. So there is a natural set of information, or a natural experiment, if you want to call it that, that gives us that set of information and comfort level saying that's the right level. That winter at 43 degrees north latitude, Reinhold Vieth, one of the researchers up in Canada, said that was the measure in my lab of his people. And you can see how low that is. And yet we have seen words that say that's normal. It is not normal. By giving 1,000 international units a day, it pushed it up a little bit, about 10 nanograms per milliliter. And by giving 4,000 IU a day, that box on the right, it only got it up to about 32 to 34 nanograms per milliliter. So already you see, if you happen to live in Canada, you're probably going to have to take a lot more vitamin D than somebody who spends a lot of time out in the sun. This slide, I want you to pay attention to left and right. Don't worry about the details on the chart. You can download it and look at the details later. From left to right, the serum levels increase. So something that you see on the far right of the chart has a higher serum level than that on the left. What I want you to focus on right now is that box, or that black line at the bottom on the left. That disease that's represented on that is rickets. What you see there is how much vitamin D it takes to prevent rickets. Every other disease that we will be talking about is to the right of that black line. That black vertical line there is 25 nanograms per milliliter. The North American population is generally below that level. So you can see what a deficiency we have, and not only the deficiency, the diseases that just flat aren't prevented because our serum levels are so low. The very first red box at the top of that chart there is about all cancers. And that happened to be a very spectacular randomized clinical trial conducted by Joan Lappy of Creighton University. And the level there is at 38, and only 38 nanograms per milliliter. There was a 35% reduction in the incidence of all cancers. That's primary prevention. It didn't happen. That is a powerful number. And she, in her trial, back again to dosage levels, was only giving them 1,100 international units a day. Just imagine what it would be if the levels of those particular people were really pumped up to the 40 to 60 nanograms per milliliter. On this also, I drew this heavy black line there to show you that's 30 nanograms per milliliter. And that's generally what's been accepted as okay, and the okay has to do with bone health, and it is okay with bone health. The 40 to 60, I want to show you where it sits. There it is. And it brackets those diseases and the information we currently have at hand about what it takes to prevent them. I would encourage you to download this chart from our website and take a look at the details on it. The next major question I get questions about all the time is toxicity. My doctor, somebody said, I can't take it, or I shouldn't take too much because it's toxic. Here is a graph showing the results of a study done by John Hathcock and others. The horizontal bar represents toxicity at a serum level measure, and it says there was no toxicity below 200 nanograms per milliliter. And remember, our scientist panel is recommending 40 to 60. If you measure it and pay attention, there is no need to be concerned about toxicity. By following the recommendations, we really expect a level of decrease in the incidence of these key diseases, breast cancer, type 1 diabetes, multiple sclerosis, and colon cancer, of 67 to 70% within 5 years. If you spread the word today, got yourself tested, and started getting your vitamin D levels up, we would have a changed country. I want to show you some just examples of studies. Back again to the is it true? I asked that question when I first started in this. It was too good to be true. So in searching for the information to present to others about whether or not it's true, I want you to know there are a number of controlled trials out there. These are the so-called gold standard, the randomized clinical trial. There certainly was the one that Joan Lappé did. There's been trials with falls, neuromuscular function, also on blood pressure and influenza, and there are many more. I like charts a lot better. This one was not a randomized clinical trial. It was an observational study done in Canada. But look at this. That red line says the serum level was less than 20 nanograms per milliliter. The green line, it was greater than 30. And what it says is that there was a 50% less chance of recurrence. Now, anybody who's ever had cancer knows that one of the biggest fears you've got is having it come back. Wouldn't it be nice to know, by doing something non-toxic and non-disturbing to your system, and oh, by the way, it's inexpensive, it costs less than 5 cents a day to take vitamin D, that you could actually improve the recurrence rate by as much as 50%? And of course, if you don't get it, you're not going to die of it. The same is true there. This is the Lappé study, and I just want to show you some highlights there. From the placebo group to the calcium and D group, over the 4 years, there was a 60% risk reduction in cancer. And if we take out the first year, and the first year was when there were a few people who had cancer, very likely incipient things that just didn't get caught, when those were taken out, there was a 77% risk reduction shown over the course of the study. That's big news. And again, that's the measure. They started at 28 nanograms per milliliter, which again is higher than the average population, certainly in the North American continent. And they only got them up to 38 nanograms per milliliter, which is pretty good. Here I want to show you some other charts. Mostly have been Dr. Garland's work and things that he has done with others. But back again to the is it true? And we're not going to go over the details. I just want you to look at the pattern. It says there's an 80% risk reduction in the incidence in breast cancer on this one. On this one, based on a different serum level, there was a 50% lower risk with 48